right, thank you for joining me for this episode of Protestia Tonight. I am your host, David Morrill, representing all of the troublemakers and ne'er-do-wells at Protestia.com. Thank you for joining me. This is a program that we hope will be glorifying to God, convicting to sinners, edifying to the saints, a program with, of course, sincere questions and biblical answers. You can go over to Protestia.com to see the latest headlines in Christian polemics and discernment news. And you can support this program. Now, this program is brought to you, of course, by our intrepid patron supporters, and you can be one of them for only $5.95 a month. You can join us in supporting this financially at patreon.com/Protestia. And for that, you will get the full version of this program, the full-length podcast, not just the free portion you're listening to now on the Bible-thumping Wingnut RSS feed on your favorite podcatcher, or watching live on YouTube, hoping the stream doesn't get cut off because I say something I shouldn't say about COVID or whatever. You can listen to the whole thing. And on Tuesday nights like this, that involves listening to this free portion, being here with us, but also another stream. There'll be a second YouTube stream. That link is in Patreon. So for those of you who are patrons, you go over there to listen to the patron portion at the conclusion of this portion. For $19.95 a month, you can join us on Tuesday nights right before this program goes live for the Bulldogmatic Bible study. Right now we are in 2 Corinthians, and we are taking our sweet time because we like to fellowship and we like to pray and we like to, talk about life and what's going on. And then we really like to just discuss in depth these verses. So I'm very happy that we're not running through it too fast. I think it's a blessing for me to get to fellowship with other believers and study the Word together, and you can join us. Now, I will say this while I'm talking about it: if $19.95 a month is not the level you can support us at or whatever, but you want to be on the Bible study, send me a message. The idea is not to sell a Bible study. The idea is to have a limitation, because those Bible studies can get out of control, and because it's tradition not to open it up to the public and then get trolled through the whole Bible study. But anyway, so $19.95 a month, you can join us for Bulldogmatic, and there are other levels of support. You can check out those kind of benefits and get some Protestia swag and whatnot on patreon.com/Protestia. Now tonight we're going to talk about the guy we warned you about. And we've been warning for a long time, and other discernment ministries have been warning for a long time about Bart Barber. Bart Barber, and there was an article up a while ago. It's probably still up, I would assume, on pulpitandpen.org, entitled Bart Barber and the Professional Idiots of the Southern Baptist Convention. Something like that. Basically, the implication here being that Bart Barber, who now is the president of the Southern Baptist Convention, he fits a very useful role for platform elites in the convention, and those of the SBC Voices stripe. Bart Barber he's the Joe Biden of the Southern Baptist Convention. Well, let's not beat around the bush here. So we're going to discuss why we think that's the case, and the latest, I would say indefensible attack that Bart Barber has leveled against SBC pastors on the issue of abortion. We're going to talk about that. We're also going to discuss, and this will probably go to the patron portion. I'm not sure. We'll see about the timing, but we're also going to discuss what it means to vote civically in the secular realm, to exercise your vote for office holders and other things based off of party and not based off of person. I tweeted out, and my Twitter account is not big. I know a lot of people that follow me on Twitter. Hint, hint. No, it's not big. But I think it was a couple days ago, I tweeted out something like, voting GOP, voting Republican over Democrat is a fruit of the Spirit. And people, obviously there were people that sort of lost their mind over that, just a handful. But we're going to talk about that as well. We're also going to, I see that we got Doctrinal Watchdog on the stream. Not a coincidence. I don't think I'm going to be able to get into this on this podcast, but I would really like to talk about Mike Winger. Mike Winger, who is a much more popular YouTuber than we are. Our audio podcast, I think, is pretty far-reaching and popular, but YouTube is sort of the secondary platform. I'm still trying to build this channel for sure. But Mike Winger, who is a YouTube theologian, is has kind of gotten into it with Tim Hurd over at the Bible Thumping Wingnut about Winger's support or his excusing and things for Bethel Church and Bill Johnson. Like I said, I don't know if we're going to be able to get into that on this podcast, but that's something we're going to discuss. That's something that's coming up, and really digging into what real discernment looks like and the propensity for public Christian ministers, and I'm putting Mike Winger into this category, to promote this idea that discernment or Christian ministry online or whatever should be done by eating the meat and spitting out the bones. Yeah, we're going to discuss that at some point. Basically, like, and I see Betty mentioning that they both went back and forth. I did see a little bit of that. I don't really want to dig into their issue at this point and into the details of this, but I do want to talk a little bit about why it's inappropriate, why it's wrong to push this idea of eating the meat and spitting out the bones. That's not real discernment. That's actually a dangerous thing to do. As we all know, or as we all should know, if we've been watching this program for a while, or you've been reading Protestia and things, false teachers teach their falseness alongside with a good amount of truth. In fact, very often it's a majority in terms of the number of things they say, or the number of time they spend on something. A majority of the time they're saying true things and preaching true things when taken out of context, and then that's when they slip in the false doctrine. So the whole idea that we can somehow, to use Bethel as an example, take the true things that might come out of the mouth of Bill Johnson and sort of just try to ignore the bad things, that's not how it's supposed to work. That's not how it works. That's not something any believer should be doing in terms of discernment. The Bible teaches us to mark and avoid false teachers, not necessarily false doctrines. And we do discuss false doctrines, but there is a reason why we're instructed to mark the teacher themselves. And it's because out of context, that teacher might have some time where they're preaching true things, but inward they're ravenous wolves, and they will devour the flock. That's a coming topic. Like I said, I think that was based off, I think Winger was taking some issues with a Doctrinal Watchdog video that called him out for something. So I have not done the looking into it, but I think we'll discuss that at some point, whether it's tonight or another night. Before we get to the topics of the day, however, the gospel of Jesus Christ, which is the most important thing that will come off of this video, the gospel of Jesus Christ it's the good news that follows the bad news, the bad news that you and I and everybody born except for Christ were born into sin, born rebels against God, dead in our trespasses and sins, an offense and in rebellion, full-blown rebellion against a holy and righteous God, and therefore deserving of condemnation and eternal punishment. That's coming for all of us except for those that place their faith and belief in Jesus Christ. Salvation, the saving of our souls from this eternal condemnation, cannot be earned by any of us. We can't do it. There's no amount of good works, no balancing, no tipping of the scales that's somehow going to get you or I into the good graces of God, where we're going to avoid this. Any sin, any sinful thought, any condition of the heart, any lustful thought, whatever it is, places us outside of salvation, offends the holy and righteous God. His standard is perfection, and none of us have the ability to do it. And yet there was one, the Son of God, second person of the Holy Trinity, Jesus Christ, who came to earth, born of a virgin, and lived that perfect life that we couldn't live. He earned that righteousness on behalf of those that would place their faith and trust in him for their salvation. He died on a cross in our place, suffered and died a death that we deserved, and paid a price to the Father that we were not capable of paying. Jesus died on that cross, was raised from the dead, raised from the dead by the power of the Spirit on the third day, and conquered death. And the Bible teaches us that salvation can be ours if we place our faith and trust in Jesus Christ, repent of our sins, turn from our wicked ways, and throw ourselves on the mercy of the court, so to speak. Throw ourselves on the mercy of Christ and appeal to his righteousness earned for each one of us. Salvation is a free gift if we would place our faith and trust in Jesus Christ. Now, again, this isn't just any Jesus Christ. This is the Jesus Christ of the scriptures. There are characteristics. There is things that are true about the real Jesus that are not true about false Jesuses. And there are a lot of false Jesuses out there. There's a lot of Jesuses of our own imagination that people like to bow down before. And that will not result in your salvation. Read the Bible, figure out who the real Jesus is. Place your faith and hope and trust in him, the Jesus of the scriptures, the Son of God, second person of the Trinity, not a created being. There was a poll. There was a poll done very recently. I think it was in Christianity Today. Christianity Astray published this, talking about evangelicals and really what is at the core just a very sad and horrifying lack of orthodox belief. High percentages of self-described evangelicals who think Jesus was a created being. Like, you believe in a created Jesus, that's not salvation. That's not the real Christ. That's a Christ that is not attested to in Scripture. Salvation is by faith and trust and hope in the real Jesus. So that's the gospel message. Now, if you want to know more about that, you can actually read it. I believe on Protestia we have some links, so you can reach out to us. We would love to talk to you more about how you may come to know and have faith in the real Jesus and understand the real gospel, not the gospel that's attached to everything else, as a way to browbeat you into following the pet cause of the day in evangelical circles, but the actual gospel of Jesus. Now, on to the issues. I believe that a lot of you have probably seen this. Those of you on Twitter have probably seen this, but none other than Bart Barber. And we warned you about this, by the way. We warned you about this before the SBC presidential election at the convention last June in Anaheim. We warned you that Bart Barber was either a complete idiot about this or purposefully deceiving people about the abortion debate, about abortion abolitionism versus the quote unquote pro-life movement. And he put up a little screed on his website. So as Bart Barber, the useful idiot of the Southern Baptist Convention platform, the guy that goes along to get along and will cover for anybody, as long as they'll pat him on the head and say, good job, you did a great job, he'll say anything they want. As he is put into place as the platform nominee after the Willie Rice, Tom Buck debacle, Willie Rice steps down. He's not willing to be considered anymore. And this late in the game, who do they call upon? Well, Bart Barber. I mean, he's been waiting his turn. He's been on all the committees and resolutions committee and this and that. He dutifully supports whatever platform. I mean, the guy got on Twitter and made a case, a terrible case, a really, really dumb case, about Ed Litton's plagiarism. Bart Barber got on Twitter to defend plagiarism by throwing the apostles and the biblical New Testament authors under the bus and saying, hey, they didn't cite the people they were talking about. So that's pretty much the same thing as Ed Litton using wholesale top to bottom sermons from another preacher. That's Bart Barber. He will defend the platform he goes out there and to his credit, I guess I would say to his credit, he goes out there and takes the arrows. He goes out there and says, oh, Ed Litton's in trouble, but Ed Litton's our guy. He's on the platform. So Bart Barber runs out to Twitter and says, I got this, you guys. Here's an 11-tweet thread about how plagiarism really isn't that big of a deal. And what Ed Litton did is like, why are you worried about this? He's not supposed to be the pastor of your church. He's just supposed to be the president of the SBC. Nothing he did here would stop him from doing a good job as the SBC president. That's Bart Barber. And he's done that again with the abortion debate. Now, we said, I'm going to go over to his little FAQ here, because he put this up when he was the choice, when he was the guy that's, hey, Willie Rice is down, he can't go, we're late in the game, let's put the nice guy up there. We can't be too controversial. Let's put nice guy Bart Barber up there. He puts an FAQ and I don't know, I haven't looked to see if this FAQ might have been there before, but I don't think so. I think this FAQ was put up specifically for him to run as SBC president. So he puts this up on fbcfarmersville.com. And by the way, don't go emailing his church or anything like that. It's, we'll have the debate here. We'll talk about it here on the podcast here out in the public. But, first question, why are you allowing yourself to be nominated for SBC president? So I assume he put this up because he was running. What's the president's role? What's the meaning of the hashtag? Like, he's campaigning here. Well, Army of Peacemakers is like Bart's hashtag. Hey, Bart, your recent tweeting about abortion and throwing SBC pastors under the bus by lying about them is hardly peacemaking. I want to throw that out there. You say Army of Peacemakers. Clearly you must not be a part of that army, considering what you just did with this tweet thread. And then theological questions, slavery. How would you describe your theology? He talks about being the mythical 3.5 point Calvinist, which I would argue can't exist logically. But he says, I'm not belligerent about my soteriological views because, hey, aren't we all standing in awe of a mystery that we can't quite comprehend? Yeah. I actually do agree with that. But down here, he's got gender roles. He's got the tried and true complementarian gender role thing, kinda. But then complains, I'm unashamed to articulate my complementary views, but I'm not boorish and misogynistic. Just tricking us there. Some complementarians are boorish, misogynistic, and abusive. Really. So you see him politicking here. You see him like walking the middle ground, and I really like the conservatives to like me, but also the liberals to like me. How can I pull this off? Well, I'll just use ad hominem here. Some complementarians, I'm not going to say who. I'm going to claim sin here, but not point out who's doing it. Eschatology. Okay, here's the current SBC views, sermon plagiarism. And he actually, to his credit, he lays out his idiotic Ed Litton defense on his website, on the website here. Follows that with, what's your position on abortion? So he put this out before he ever ran for SBC president. This has been here for a long time. And the issue that we took, the thing I took issue with, I suppose, was that he refused to accept abortion on the scientific terms and on the legal terms, and now we're having this debate again. Like, he's real mad that we're all upset at the ERLC for torpedoing Louisiana's abolitionist bill. And yet, if the ERLC had not signed Brent Leatherwood, who's now he was the interim president after Russell Moore rolled a grenade under the tent and left. Brent Leatherwood was the ERLC interim president. Now he's been selected as the actual president. Credentials aside, I'm not sure he actually has the right, pedigree, so to speak, to do this job, but we'll set that aside for a second. The ERLC signed on to a letter opposing the abolitionist bill on false premises, on issues that were actually addressed in the bill, things like life of the mother situations, or primarily coercion. So the bill in Louisiana, and really honestly the legal process generally, would not have made a 16-year-old forced to get an abortion against her will responsible for that abortion. That's a straw man. That was never part of that bill, and yet the ERLC pretended like it was, and these other signers of the pro-life movement pretended like it was, and basically were able to get that bill torpedoed. And there are abortions happening in Louisiana right now, children dying in Louisiana right now because of Brent Leatherwood and the ERLC. And your cooperative program dollars, if you're a Southern Baptist church, they went to pay for that. They went to pay for the public policy lobbying religious liberty arm of the SBC to go torpedo anti-abortion legislation that would have saved lives. That's just the truth. And you see Barber making these arguments on his website. This is the stuff that he parroted on the tweet thread. A bunch of straw man lies about abortion abolitionists like myself. He says, abortion abolitionists generally oppose exceptions in law to save the life of the mother. Now, if you've seen, I did a video a little while ago called Never Go Full Barber. Look, it's on the Protestia YouTube channel. You can go find it. We dig into this and explain why abortion is not a procedure to save the life of the mother. That's not what it is. And by the way, I will dig into a little bit some of the differences in medical terminology, because I think this is important to know. But an abortion is a procedure. The way that it's referred to legally, this is very important. The term abortion is not, even though it's used medically for different situations sometimes, spontaneous abortion is a term for miscarriage. The term abortion used in a legal argument and with these bills is talking about the intentional targeting of the unborn life for destruction. It's not talking about premature birth that's necessary in the case of an ectopic pregnancy or some other threat to the mother's life. That's not what it's talking about. The life of the mother issue can be and should be rhetorically and legally separate from what we're actually talking about, which is purposefully killing an unborn life to end that life because you don't want to continue the pregnancy. That's not what these other issues are. And yet Bart's saying here, well, we need exceptions in the law to save the life of the mother. You don't need to perform an abortion as we understand an abortion is for that purpose. And they know that. Like go to liveaction.org and look at this stuff. Scientifically speaking, that is a different process. An ectopic pregnancy does not require an abortion. It requires a premature birth. Usually, not always even, but usually too premature for the child to be viable outside the womb, but it's not an abortion. Anyway, yeah, he talks about us opposing incrementalism. It's not that we oppose incrementalism, but we don't think that it's superior to abolition. That's all. Like if it's given an incrementalist bill or nothing, most of us would vote for the incrementalist bill because, again, we're about saving lives. But we're not for this idea that abortion is best confronted by just little steps at a time. What we believe, and it's very simple, what we believe is that we openly and honestly and forcefully, when necessary, proclaim God's truth into the culture. If it is true that unborn life is protected life along with born life in and out of the womb is the same value to God, all created in the Imago Dei, all unique and designed as unique people by God. If we believe that and we believe in equal protection, then we just say it. We don't buy into this. Well, abortion is we should only hold abortion doctors accountable for this, and the woman that goes and voluntarily kills her unborn is not responsible. That's not equal protection. That's not consistent with the Bible, not consistent with God's law. And yet that is what Bart Barber is advocating. I mean, and his reasons here they're not smart, and they're hypocritical. He says here, first, that he is not an abortion abolitionist because he appreciates the pro-life movement and all. That's not a reason, dude. That's not a reason to not want to abolish abortion. Well, they've had a good game, so I won't push for the totality of God's truth on this because really I don't want them to get their feelings hurt. The pro-life movement get their feelings hurt if I say that I want to abolish abortion. Dishonor the work of the pro-life movement by calling it sinful. Not supporting God's law as it exists and half supporting it, or not holding equal sins to equal punishment, equal account, is sinful. It's lie. This is false witness. When we say that the doctor is responsible, but not the woman that chose to do it as well, they're both responsible. To say otherwise is a lie. So yeah, that's why we call it sinful. He said, I believe fervently the law must explicitly acknowledge an exception allowing for abortion in cases like ectopic pregnancies or when the life of the mother is in jeopardy. That's not what an abortion is for, Bart. This is not complicated. This is straightforward. This is simple. Which, if I'm going to take Bart Barber as being an intelligent man, it's debatable. But let's just say, I'm going to say he's an intelligent man. He can figure this out. Then we're left with no other conclusion than he's being dishonest and sinful and lying about this issue. Abolitionist bills do not stop a premature birth in case of ectopic pregnancies. They do not criminalize it. They do not criminalize a supposed life of the mother situation, which is incredibly rare anyway, but they don't criminalize it. They certainly do not criminalize a young woman or a minor being forced to get an abortion. That's all a lie. And yet, we're dealing with this. Yet we're dealing with Bart Barber saying on Twitter, taking Dusty Devers, who is an SBC pastor, and throwing him under the bus. Bart tweeted this out. Last week, this tweet represents the lowest point of dishonesty to which we can descend when we sell out to the crass tone of secular politics instead of following the way of Christ. So to Bart Barber, he seems like he is arguing that wanting to abolish abortion and wanting to provide actual equal legal protection for the unborn is not following the way of Christ. He goes on to say Devers is attacking the consistent pro-life position of the Southern Baptist Convention, as if we care what the position of the SBC is if it's wrong, as if we care about that, as represented by more than 20 resolutions adopted over the span of 40 years. Now, this is a lie. There was 2 abortion resolutions just last year, and one of them was an abolitionist resolution. He says, since 1980, we have consistently said that abortion should be illegal unless the life of the mother would be in peril if the pregnancy were to continue. Again, don't need an abortion for that. That means, don't miss this, the Southern Baptists have not supported exceptions permitting abortion in cases of rape or incest. Yes, and that's a good position to have. Rape, one sin is not does not justify other sins. God still has a plan for that child's life. So he says ours is not a moderate position. I don't think it's a moderate position, but it's not a fully biblical position. It's just not. But he goes through, tweet after tweet after tweet, raking this Dusty Devers over the coals here. And then continuing to lie. He says, because if you want an exception in the law for ectopic pregnancies, you don't need an abortion for that. Again, where the mother and the baby will be in grave danger of death and pregnancy were not ended, he will label you against the innocent person. And then tries to save Brent Leatherwood from the indefensible decision of the ERLC to sign on to the letter that torpedoed the Louisiana abolitionist bill. That was an indefensible decision by an organization being paid for by Southern Baptists. And fortunately, there has been a lot of discussion over this. Travis McNeely called this out. He said, here's 2 examples where Bart was proven objectively false. And Travis writes, and this is House Bill 813, this is Louisiana bill that the ERLC helped torpedo. Question, could a mother forced into an abortion be convicted? No. The bill explicitly provides that a mother forced into an abortion under duress is not subject to criminal liability. Do you think that Bart will actually discuss this? No. He's too busy attacking faithful SBC pastors, too busy defending the platform, which is something he excels at. Although, pretty obviously falsely. Regarding ectopic pregnancies with reference to the legal code, would the bill allow doctors to deal with medical emergencies like ectopic pregnancies? Yes, the bill does not alter existing Louisiana case law, which provides a person is excused from criminal liability if he acts under a duress of circumstances to protect life. So in the case of an ectopic pregnancy, first of all, most ectopic pregnancies, the vast majority, the embryo, I guess would be in that state at that point, has already passed away. So we're not talking about having to target a life for death because death has already occurred. But ectopic pregnancies result in premature births, and the young life is not developed enough to survive outside the womb. But we're not trying to kill it. Very, very important here to understand. The bigger issue here, well, I shouldn't say the bigger issue, but the distressing thing is this is the president of the largest evangelical denomination in the country, who has decided that rather than maybe, I don't know, call divers and ask, hey, what do you mean by this? Maybe clear things out. He's decided to go on a Twitter rampage, an ignorant Twitter rampage, and double down on things that he has been told and corrected on over and over and over again. Like, Bart is not only ignorant on this issue, he is being insolent in his ignorance. And the important thing for him, I mean, I really have no other conclusion that I can draw except he is concerned about protecting the platform and the institution and perhaps his own reputation. That's all we can conclude. And if you'll remember, I'm going to drag this back a little bit. We're going to blast from the past here. Because this was a few years ago. This article from January of 2020. So this had been right before COVID kind of became the thing that it was. Article entitled Bart Barber and the Professional Idiots of the Southern Baptist Convention. It reads, I have no affinity for these men. And by the way, this is a picture of Dave Miller over at SBC Voices, in case anybody didn't know. I have no affinity for these men. I sense no brotherhood with them. Despite the fact they're pastors, I have no regard for them and give them no honor. They are due no respect, no reverence, no esteem, and have no place at the table of communion among the saints. They are godless, gutless, gratuitous idiots who the world would be better off without. Now, this is a little harder than I would probably go. Perhaps I'm not a pastor anyway, but I do hold to this understanding. It is true that the pastorate often, not always, often attracts men with no ability to make it in the real world. The church is often a soft place to provide a soft landing for men of soft hands and a softer intellect. Now, tell me how this doesn't describe what Bart Barber is saying with regard to abortion and abolitionist legislation. Is he not being... It's one of two options. He's either just completely dunderheaded, or he's being purposefully deceptive. Either one isn't good. I'm not sure I could say which one is worse. Probably if he was being purposefully deceptive, that would be worse. Like, he could be just dumb, I suppose. The bigger issue, and part of the reason I named this podcast Let's Go Barber, to tweak those that get their underwear in a wad about saying let's go Brandon. We've had that conversation before. You can go find that on Protestia about why we don't really have an issue with that phrase, but really because Bart Barber serves a very similar purpose. His strings are being pulled, much like our president's strings are being pulled by people behind him. He can't really make decisions on his own. Now, Bart Barber isn't senile or something. It's not like he can't think. It's just that he's so beholden to the whims of the platform that he'll basically do whatever they say. And this fits into how this article reads. The church is often a soft place that provides a soft landing for men of soft hands and a softer intellect. The pastorate has too often become the fat trap and cesspool for talentless, soulless, effeminate hacks who are drawn to an office job in which they only occasionally waddle their potluck swollen paunches out to the nursing home to romance dying widows. The idea of visitation is showing up wherever there is cake. Their job is to preach to choirs, pretend like they manage the women who instead manage them. I'm going to talk about this in a second. And sit back while their congregation reads from a Lifeway Quarterly, creating armies of world-washed, brainless Southern Baptist drones. I saw a lot of these brainless Southern Baptist drones at the 2022 annual meeting. They were the people that were brainlessly standing up and giving a standing ovation to Rick Warren. They were the people that brainlessly put their ballot in for Bart Barber because he seemed like the nice guy. He seemed like the one that can like unite us and get the theological conservatives and the progressives all on the same side. Yeah, brainless drones, probably unable to articulate the issues, the essential issues at play in the convention at all. And article is continues. The only reason these men have jobs is because they live such a miserable life of uselessness that no one of higher intellect, skill, or drive covets their position. Now, this is really sad, is it not? This is very, very sad. And I think the polling and the data out there for the modern evangelical church bears this out. I think it demonstrates this. The idea that the pastorate, by and large, has become either vision casting, and obviously there are exceptions. I don't want to say every pastor is like this because that's not true. But certainly the pastorate has either become vision casting, market driven CEOs, like a cheap and evangelical knockoff of Steve Jobs, or it's become basically effeminate. As there's no polling that indicates that churches, even the most conservative, theologically, the most conservative churches out there still have more women than men. And the modern church it's a little bit of a bait and switch, because if we look from the outside, it seems like men run the church. Well, we got men in the pastorate and the men are elders and things, but with a lot of churches, you look below the surface and they're really run by the women. The women are on all the committees and they're doing all the work, all of the way that the worship service is set up and the programs and things, all geared towards women, women and children. And the men that thrive in those environments are often softer and more relational and nicer and not willing to really hurt anybody's feelings over anything. In a lot of churches, these are the men that wind up in the pastorate. And I say that lamenting it, because that's not really the example we see from Christ himself or from the early New Testament church leaders, the apostles and things. They weren't those kind of men. They were the ones that would just say the plain truth and expect people to potentially get their feelings hurt, but they would say the plain truth and be unapologetic about it. Those aren't the kind of men, unfortunately, that populate a lot of pews of evangelical churches. And I'm not talking about necessarily having pastors that are physically strong and imposing. This is a dispositional thing. There's a masculine disposition that is unapologetic and willing to fight and willing to just say it straight up, willing to have people not like them. It's essential to preaching the truth. It has to happen. If we're too worried about what everybody feels and not hurting anybody's feelings, that does damage to the witness of the church. We believe the Spirit does the work of conversion. The Spirit does the work of illuminating Scripture and growth. The Holy Spirit converts the unregenerate heart, regenerates the unbeliever. And because the Spirit does that work, it's not our job to massage the message, not our job to have a version of the gospel that we think is going to play well with this group or with that group. And well, we don't emphasize sin too much, because that'll be a turnoff. We don't care about turnoffs that are true, because the Spirit is the one that does the work. And this is the example we see in the New Testament. And unfortunately, we're left, guys like Bart Barber, they're not like this. There's a reason, like the reason that Bart Barber will not actually talk about what abortion is or isn't, the fact that legally speaking, abortion is the targeting of that unborn life and not a premature birth for ectopic pregnancy. The reason he won't have that discussion is because he thinks it looks too unreasonable to the world. He is trying to make friends with the world. He's trying to have a Christian position that still seems reasonable. It seems reasonable, and because he thinks that the world and those who stand against the Church of Jesus have characterized the abolitionist position as too crazy, Bart doesn't want to be associated with that. And he's unwilling to have this discussion on the merits. Now, the pastors that have in Louisiana that put forward this bill that got torpedoed by the Southern Baptist Convention, got torpedoed by the ERLC, are now reaching out to him saying, hey, would you have this conversation? Let's have this conversation on the merits. I'm going to make what I think is a safe prediction. And let me put this up here. This is a tweet from Brian. I don't know if he pronounces it Gunter or Gunter, but he said specifically, I've never used Twitter before today, but when the SBC president decides to misrepresent my work to abolish abortion, then I have to join the conversation. Bart Barber, I'm the SBC pastor who introduced House Bill 813. Let's talk as brothers in Christ. And he's got a lot of support put out here for this. But I'm going to go ahead and make what I think is a pretty safe prediction. I don't think Bart Barber is going to have this conversation. I think he's going to pretend he's stepped in it. He knows he's stepped in it. His best strategy is to stop talking about it and hope that it all just sort of is water under the bridge eventually. That's what I think is going to happen. Now, maybe he's more of a man than I think he is. Maybe. And we'll see. I mean, I think if he comes out and is willing to actually discuss this on the merits, actually have the debate over the issue, he will have earned quite a bit of respect from me, because I think there's no way. I think that Bart Barber is very much the type of pastor described in this article, which goes on to say, what I find, and this is a tweet from Bart Barber. This would have been in 2020. The article says, who I find truly despicable in the self-destruction of the SBC are not only the Judas priests who serve as wolves in sheep's clothing, pretending they're conservatives, while they promote a wildly liberal and unbiblical worldview on everything from homosexuality to rampant globalism, like J.D. Greer, Al Mohler, Danny Aiken, Ronnie Floyd, or Russell Moore. Who I find despicable are the class of professional idiots who make their home in SBC pulpits. Bart Barber is one. And this is a tweet from back in 2020. A couple of my church members have asked me about the slanderous lies people are spreading about George Soros and the SBC. Here's a very good rebuttal. And he links to bpnews.net, Baptist Press, I believe, would be their website, I think. An explainer answers common questions about the ERLC, yada, 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 yada. Now, Barber, and this may be a history that some of you don't know, has a very close tie with the ERLC. He was on the Leadership Council, hardly a neutral source on the topic. He is precisely the type of hayseed pastor and local yokel clergyman that corrupts entities lust after to put on their leadership councils and trustee boards. Now, this is true. If you look at the current executive committee even, but especially trustee boards for SBC entities and things, it's a lot of yes men. It's a lot of men that can be bought for some finger food at the next I'd say cocktail party, but it's like, whatever non-alcoholic thing that SBC leaders drink when they get together. They can be bought off for next to nothing. A pat on the back and a good old boy, and they can be bought off for an attaboy, is what I should say. It says they need the kind of inbred naivete that men like Barber can give. Their blatant stupidity is a commodity that enriches Southern Baptist elites. That's true. And also, with guys like Barber, the thought that, hey, eventually if you play your cards right, if you support us and defend us, and if you get out there and take the hits for us, we'll pay you back eventually. We'll support you when it's time that you want to have a leadership position, like, I don't know, maybe the president of the convention. So yeah, and this was, I'm not going to dig into it, but basically Bart Barber has a history of this, guys. He has the same way that he's defending the indefensible attack on pro-life, I say pro-life, let's say abolitionist legal action, the same way he's defending the indefensible attack from the ERLC, the same way he defended the indefensible plagiarism of Ed Litton, he was back in the day defending the indefensible funding coming through George Soros and the National Immigration Forum. And it's actually, and I think they incorrectly named Soros as the chair of the National Immigration Forum. But anyway, back in 2020, he's defending the indefensible sources of funding for the ERLC. This isn't his first time. We knew who he was back then. What it really indicates, I think what it should indicate more than anything else, is this is perhaps one of the presidency of Bart Barber could very well be the dying gasp of a dying convention. How many churches are going to now see the writing on the wall? With Bart Barber at the helm, so to speak, and men like him at the head of the SBC, how many people are going to see the light? How many people are going to finally pull their churches out saying we have no fellowship with men like this? I mean, Bart Barber is right now an unrepentant liar. Very provably lied, published it on Twitter, which I know that the guy's a Twitter addict, self-admitted Twitter addict. He tweets 10 times a day, literally 10 times a day. That's Bart Barber, a pastor and a farmer, and now president of the SBC, still has time to tweet 10 times a day on average. And he's tweeted verifiable lies, verifiable falsehoods. And we are, just like every other online ministry, calling him to repent. Come clean, Bart. Repent. Apologize. Make reconciliation with those you've lied against. And let's have this conversation on the actual merits. Let's have it on the merits. And figure out if what you are promoting and what the ERLC did has any sort of excuse whatsoever, because I don't think it does. I really don't think it does. So, one other thing, by the way, while we're talking about abortion, some were trying to give me a hard time online for when I called the term spontaneous abortion as a straw man and a deception. Now, the term I want to be clear about this. The term spontaneous abortion has been used historically as a medical term that's a synonym for a miscarriage. So basically saying spontaneous and that the mother is not trying to have a miscarriage, and abortion because the pregnancy is aborted at this point, it stops. The term abortion, just taken and by the etymology of the word, just means to stop something. You can abort a space shuttle launch, for example. That's an abortion of the launch. But the modern parlance of the term abortion means a very specific thing. So when somebody gets in the weeds and they say, hey, spontaneous abortion is, you want to outlaw that too, or they try to make you talk about something other than the actual issue, we have to remind them that we're not talking about miscarriages. Nobody's trying to outlaw miscarriage. Nobody's is submitting House bills in Louisiana about miscarriages. So yes, I acknowledge that the term spontaneous abortion means miscarriage, and it uses the term abortion in its base definitional level of saying the pregnancy stops. The pregnancy is aborted, but it's not an abortion in the way we use the term. It's just not. So don't get caught in the weeds about that. There are plenty of terms that have shifted to have a modern meaning that is useful to us, that we need to stick to and defend. We need to defend the idea that the term abortion is talking about the purposeful targeting of the unborn life for destruction, and the term spontaneous abortion is a miscarriage and not particularly related. There's no moral comparison between a miscarriage and an abortion at all. And I mean, there are plenty of terms like this. So, I mean, like, clinical depression, to the extent that we want to say that clinical depression is a real thing, and that's debatable, but let's just say, depression generally, it used to be called black dog syndrome. Now, if I started trying to argue that depression isn't really a thing because, and I started referring to it as black dog instead, that would be for the purpose of confusion. Anybody who's talking about the current debate we're all having and referring to spontaneous abortions is just trying to sow confusion. In terms of the actual issues at hand, we're not talking about miscarriages. We're talking about a very specific procedure for a very specific reason. And we got to drill down to that. You hear me say all the time, we got to get down to the doctrine, get down to the ideas. Get past all this, the confusion and the purposeful confusion in the rhetoric. We got to do that with this as well. That's what we need. Hold men like Bart Barber's feet to the fire and say, let's have a discussion of this on the terms. Stop straw manning over here with ectopic pregnancies. This bill doesn't prevent that. It never did. And tell Brent Leatherwood and the ERLC the same thing. I don't blame anybody at this point for saying this is untenable. We cannot hold on. We cannot stay associated with these men. I can see both sides of it to an extent. But this is further evidence, as far as I'm concerned, that the SBC it's a lost cause. And I know I got friends that disagree with me on that. We've had episodes of this show or podcasts on this channel. It's the same way, But I mean, the ERLC has doubled down. They have made this their position. They've made this their place to take a stand. I mean, they're doing some sort of a make abortion unnecessary kind of a thing, right? That's their new slogan, make abortion unnecessary. It's never necessary to murder anybody, just for the record. Never necessary. But what they're claiming by saying that we're going to make abortion unnecessary is that it's been necessary, that there are necessary abortions. Now, clearly they can't be talking about ectopic pregnancies and life of the mother situations, because the president of the SBC has told us that those abortions are necessary. They wouldn't want to make those abortions unnecessary. So what are they talking about? Well, they're not telling us, but we know what they're talking about. They're preparing to make the argument that abortion is necessary because of economic or circumstantial conditions. And so how do you make, if we're arguing that mothers, young mothers, whatever, are having necessary or what they believe to be necessary abortions, that's either going to be economic concerns, perhaps their age concerns, perhaps because of, rape and incest or something. So some of those things, if you said, hey, we want to make abortion unnecessary, again, I disagree with the premise, but if we say we want to make it unnecessary by stopping rape and incest, that's a good cause. Or we want to stop out of wedlock birth or teenagers getting pregnant, that's a good cause. We should stop that. But I get the feeling that's not what they're going after primarily. I mean, the solutions to those things are pretty simple. What they're going after is the mother in her 20s or 30s who gets pregnant and she's like, I can't afford this baby. I've had this baby out of wedlock and it's too expensive and I can't afford it, so I'm going to go get an abortion. And making that one unnecessary involves redistribution of wealth. It involves collectivist economic policies. It involves commissioning the government, having the church commission the government for economic redistribution and social action. That's the door they're opening up with this whole make abortion unnecessary nonsense. They said in their little thing here, they said, we are a movement that affirms and defends the dignity of all human life. When we believe that everyone is made in the image of God, it changes everything. Join us as we work to make abortion unnecessary. I can't scroll down, I guess. Unnecessary in our lifetime by inspiring and equipping a new generation, this is weird, to embrace a holistic view of life. Well, what do we think a holistic view of life is? That's the Karen Swallow Prior argument. That's the argument that says being truly pro-life is about supporting life at every stage. So if you're going to support not murdering the unborn, well, you also should support other things that are life-affirming, like taking care of people's material needs, and not turning away those that cross the border illegally, because that would be inhumane. And if you're pro-life, you got to be pro their lives too. This is where this is all headed. You know, it's a thinly veiled straw man, thinly veiled argument that's being made for this. And this is this started as a thread from SBC Underground, and talking about 3 unbiblical errors made by Brent Leatherwood at the ERLC. He made 3. Number 1, he helped to defeat the abortion abolition bill in Louisiana. He does not believe the unborn deserve the same rights as everyone else. This is true, easily to prove. He led the ERLC to defend religious minorities' rights to worship false gods. It's not what the ERLC is supposed to be promoting. They're supposed to be promoting religious liberty for Southern Baptists. And religious liberty, their version of religious liberty is basically religious pluralism. It says the ERLC should only defend man's right to trust in Christ without coercion, though man might use this liberty to sin. True. And then the Stand for Life slogan, uniting to make abortion unnecessary. At the SBC annual meeting in June, messengers told the ERLC this slogan implies abortion is necessary. Yep. And the ERLC said, we hear you. No, they didn't. Well, they heard us. They just didn't care. That's where it stands right now. We're going to keep following it, obviously. Now, if you're a patron, stick on the stream. I want to thank everybody else for being here tonight for this episode of Protestia Tonight. For the troublemakers over here, I am your host, David Morrill. God bless you. Thank you again for joining us. And as always, Semper Reformanda.